Hi everyone, hope you're doing well today. We're going to continue on with our project of handling the roll on our sweaters. That's one of the most difficult things that you have to deal with when you're in the finishing process is getting a look that is going to be finished without all of those curlies that you get when your knit comes off the knitting machine. Even if you're steaming it, blocking it, there's still the yarn has such a memory to curl that you have to do things in order to be able to manage that. So the sweater that I'm wearing today has what I call a pearl roll collar and trim. So what does that mean? That means that after the finished shoulder seam, when I got that finished, then the knitting was put back on the machine with the public side out. I'm going to call the knit side public and the purl side private. The knitting was put on the machine so that I could do rows of knitting, which then, as I am finished, rolls over toward the public side. So the private trim, the full side showing, is showing on the front of the sweater, and it provides a really, really nice finish, and it keeps your sweater managed. And once you have that applied, you don't have any more issues with your sweater trying to curl back. Now, if you are trying out some of these techniques, you're just going to have to knit however many rows you think might work, 20 or 30 for your collar or your front, and let it roll back and see what it's going to do. Yarns are all different, so one yarn I might only need 20 rows. On another yarn I might need 30 rows. I very rarely ever go past 30 though, so just so that you have kind of a guideline. And I am using, in this particular sweater, I am using a yarn that was purchased at a yarn shop. So it is a little bigger yarn. Now, when you're doing you can do the same thing in any one of your knit machines, your fine gauge, your um, extra fine gauge, your standard, your bulky. You can do any of those particular designs in exactly the same manner. Now, be sure that you are leaving, if you're going to wear jewelry, be sure that you're leaving enough space between the two fronts so that the jewelry can show through and not be having any kind of an issue with it being hidden. Also, check your jewelry to be sure that it doesn't snag the yarn in your sweater, because that is another thing that is really important. You need to have things that are going to work for you so they showcase your beautiful work, not take away from it or distract from it. So now on the sleeve on this particular garment, I'm get it up here for you now. You see the sleeve is crocheted. These are just rows of crochet around the bottom. Now you do have, it contains the knit here, so you have to be sure that you don't get it so tight that you can't get your hand in and out of it. So be sure to check that as you're going along with your crocheting on the bottom. And this particular sweater has just a turned up hem that I've demonstrated before. So all in all, it leaves a beautiful garment that doesn't have any oddities to it, as you as you might want to call some of these things that are frustrating to us sometimes when we're managing. So it just has been for me an excellent way to manage the roll of a yarn. So I call it a pearl roll detail. Anytime you are going to use something, just make it into a detail. And so when you are talking to people about it, you have designed a sweater that has a pearl roll collar and detail down the front and a crocheted sleeve bottom. Now you could also do the roll at the bottom of the sleeve, but you have to be a little bit careful with that because sometimes that roll will catch on things and you don't want to have it having any kind of a problem with catching on something or maybe pulling the yarn or having something distorted out of shape. Now, another really great way to handle a roll on a sweater is to turn it back. And here is a sleeve. I'm going to get it up here where I can see if I can get it in the camera where I'm not having in a kind of a, okay, that seems to be a little bit better in terms, well, there. Now, this sleeve is turned back this far, and on each one of those yellow pins, you see a row of elastic thread that has been run through the bottom, and there is elastic thread that has been run through the bottom of the very bottom edge of the sleeve. So that gives me the turn back, which has just whip stitch onto the inside of the knit, and the really getting the glare there. Let me see if I can turn the light off and see if I can't show it to you a little bit better. That's better, I think. Sometimes we have cooperation from these things, and sometimes we do not. But this is a great way to manage the bottom of the sleeve. It gives a little weight to the sleeve, and it just handles the bottom like a cuff almost, so you don't have to worry about it stretching out of shape. So that's an excellent way to manage any kind of a yarn. I knit the sweater for my mother, and her arms were quite a bit shorter than mine, and so when she got the sweater, the sleeves were too long. So she's actually the one that turned it up, whipped it around, and ran the elastic thread through it. So I have to credit that design inspiration to my mom, and she wore it for a really long time, and then when she passed, it came back to me, and it's been a marvelous, marvelous little coat. I have loved it. Now, on that same piece, there is the collar. And you see this is the knit up this far, and it comes back all the way to here. So it is a nice collar that hugs the neck when it's being worn, which it makes it really comfortable in the wintertime because you're not having to deal with all that wind whipping around the top of the neck. And this one has buttons and buttonholes, so you can see the, can you see? You really have to get a light monitor here to be able to show you this a little bit better. Sorry. Anyway, we have to have some things to laugh about, right? So now, as you are finishing up your garment, a couple extra things that I want you to be aware of. In your sweater, when you have finished knitting it, this is the front, and you see that the yarn is wanting to roll to the back. So now if I wanted to contain that, if I didn't have enough yarn, I could turn that back, usually about an inch or inch and a quarter, and I could stitch all the way down that, and that now contains this particular roll on this area of the sweater, and I don't have any issues with it. If you just sleeve the top, it doesn't really look very finished, so you almost have to do something around the top to be able to finish it. Now, think about this as coming up and down. It's going to roll in. When you get to the bottom of your sweater, what you're going to experience is that the yarn rolls up. So lengthwise, it's going to roll toward the purl side again, always rolls toward the knit side, excuse me. But it rolls up. Remember on the front now, it rolls in like this. So you have to manage these two areas just slightly differently in order to get them so that you have a consistent look. And on the bottom of the sleeve, it's going to do the same kind of thing as this, so it'll roll up. Now, a lot of sweaters have that. Just leave the roll up on the bottom of the sleeves and have it as a finished element in the sleeve. Sometimes I do that, but more often than not, I have some kind of a finish. So we can look at turning them back and turning them into a hem. Now be sure you get enough length so that you're going to be able to do that and not get your sweater too short, or knitting enough width so that you can turn back on the center front and have a finish there, and then come up with some kind of a collar or something that you're going to put around the shoulders, which will then make it something fun that coordinates with the look of your sweater. Each one of those things is important. If you have, like this sweater for an example, I have this sweater finished and the yarn is hiding someplace in one of my boxes when I moved, and so I have to either decide to, and of course I'm not able to replace the yarn and get any exactly matching yarn because the dye lot is different now. I have sufficient to finish the sweater, but it's very safely tucked away in one of those, just one of those hiding places that you are sure that you're going to remember where you put it. I'm sure you have hiding places like that too with some of your things. So there will be a couple of things that I could do. I could either turn it back and turn it into a hem, leave the collar at the moment without doing anything additional to it, and it would be a get by. If then I do find the yarn at some point up the road here as I'm unpacking my boxes, then I will have a knit edge for the neckline if I choose to at that moment in time. So you have lots of options. I'd like to give you lots of choices, so it's really fun for you to have your finished items. And when you have them finished and looking so nicely, then people are really excited about getting a gift. Now, tomorrow we're going to talk a little bit more about your shoulder shape. There are several different shoulder shapes that as you are knitting, you need to be aware of. You can look at my shoulders, and I am the same shoulder width, right and left, and I have just a little bit of a slope. So we'll talk about how you handle the slope, and we'll talk about how you handle some of the other interesting physical things that go on with our bodies that we're really not aware of until we actually start paying attention to what they look like and how they impact the way that our clothing fits us. So you have a really wonderful rest of your day, and happy knitting.